afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another Propagandacast thoughts on an update, in this case the Elbe Day update. This is actually the second time I'm doing it. For those few who actually managed to watch it before I took the previews down, apparently there were some problems with background noise being too loud for some people, and of course in that department I figure, if enough complain, I'll redo it, and there was. So, lower volume here. There'll still be a bit, otherwise it's a bit too boring for me to just jammer on with nothing else there, but overall it should not distract, I hope, for other people. But the Elbe Day update, the second massive update after the March deployment, whereas March deployment though was focused on infantry and light vehicles, the Elbe Day update focuses on armour. A bit anti-tank guns and a bit artillery as well. In that department, I focus on all the splash damage attached to the word. For example, mortar rounds, artillery rounds, tank shots and all that have been improved, so they're more effective overall. Some of them are slightly modified to be less effective in certain sense, but that's more than intended, so they don't become super weapons. But overall, that means if a tank shoots, and it's actually hits, they're less likely to get away from that splash damage. Same applies to mortars and such. Also, now already there in that department, there's going to be some large differences for people and how things are approached. There's some small infantry changes. Conscripts are slightly better at range. A slightly larger one, though, is Grenadiers, who now have, for example, they have to choose either the LMG-42 or the Gewehr-43 if they go for that. And even then, there's some slight difference now. For example, the LMG is actually much more flat overall, but also much better at range now than was actually previously. Was the Gewehr-43 sort of more short to medium range weapons. So there are some changes there. But overall, where the meat is in the tanks and the tanks department. Mostly vehicles, not really, but tanks, and assault guns. And of course, in that department, there's one binding issue that really ties together, and that's changes to the penetration system. Specifically, when it comes to the penetration to the penetration system is now depending on the range, and there's of course the relative range of the weapon. There's actually different penetration values. In sort of middle, it's sort of what you'll be used to. Up closer, though, you actually have higher penetration. You actually get a bonus to penetrate. Whereas at range, at the fast range of the weapon, it actually penetrates less. I think it's 20 to 25%. But basically, that's the rule of it. So that, for example, makes a massive difference. Because that way, for example, medium tanks, more speedy vehicles sort of gain a benefit from actually getting close and shooting up there. And for example, really outmaneuvering heavier tanks in that department. For example, a pair of Panzer IVs getting behind an IS-2, shooting in there, for example. Or for that matter, T-34s doing the same with a Tiger tank. So, those are, for example, some of the changes. And overall, it also makes heavy armor a bit more, worth it at range. Since again, they have a higher chance of basically shrugging off any shot at range. So in that department, Tigers, IS-2s, KV tanks, for example, become a bit more worth it at range, although of course the KV having to get close, it's not going to make that vast of a difference. The KV-8, by the way, also now having less health, huzzah. So that's generally nice as well. But all of that, the penetration really just makes a massive difference. And again, does add some survivability in several cases to tanks. If you can keep it larger distances, you might have a slightly higher chance of basically shrugging off some shots, which in some dependence can again give you a bit of advantage. And again, with heavy armor, might give you a slightly higher chance of actually getting close and doing some damage. So that's actually something to keep in mind. Anti-tank guns, field guns have received a bit more penetration as well overall. Not massively so, but still a small boost. That's another small difference there, if you will. But otherwise, it just changes a lot of some of the medium tanks. For example, got more armor. Panzer IV got a lot more armor, so for example, it's actually quite tough. T-34 also got more armor. It does more the damage per shot as well. So there's some changes there. It shoots a bit slower as well, I think, but overall should be a bit more intimidating as well. And now, for example, actually has a chance of bouncing off Panzer IV or Stug shots. So overall, for the Soviet players, it might actually feel a bit more survivable. Same with the T-34-85, for example. Slightly tougher there, slightly more armor. Stug, less armor, less health, less penetration though, only slightly less. On the other hand, it's actually much better at killing infantry now. Plus, of course, another huge boon for German tanks is the Pinto machine guns, while more expensive, actually now also do something. So in that department, it's actually worth a damn to get your tanks or assault guns, so machine gun upgrades. Same for the Soviet tanks that do have them. they're, for example, also more worth it. So that's, for example, a nice little benefit also to keep in mind as you play the game. You do get a bit more out of it. As well, that is. I mean, it's not just the Germans in that department, they get something out of it. And of course, again, overall heavy armor a bit more interesting now. Lots more penetration, mostly in them. The Tiger got more penetration. Panther got more penetration, although the medium tanks got more penetration as well. IS-2 got more penetration. ISU 152 got more penetration. I mean, most of it actually got more penetration in the heavy armor department, except I think the KV-1. So again, I mean, that also adds a bit more punch to them. To sort of, also keep that in mind. Which of course is always nice as well, makes them a bit more valuable as well. And adds a bit more of a difference. The Panther also lost some health, actually. But still got more penetration. Slight changes to its cost. Tiger, for example, also received those. There might be some slight changes, for example. So now they cost more fuel, but less manpower, for example. So that's also something to keep in mind. Stug also, by the way, besides all the other changes, actually got much cheaper, in fact. So of course now it's much easier to build up a small battery. Same with the SU-76, which has got more expensive, but on the other hand, more penetration, more damage. Plus, of course, its badass ability is now more effective due to the splash damage changes. So overall, again, I mean, there's a lot of changes in that department. Overall, things which makes armor play, I think, a lot more interesting. And just like the March deployment make, infantry engagements a lot more interesting and a lot more tactical, so does the Elbe Day update do the same to armor. I mean, overall, you can pull up a lot more maneuvers with your tanks, and for example, again, with maneuvering with your medium tanks, it's much more rewarded, again, with that little bonus where you can sort of do more penetration as you get up close, for example. That does add a lot in terms of adding things. So that, for example, is also good to keep in mind. I mean, you do get more out of it maneuvering with your medium tanks rather than rushing straight into a line of field guns or anti-tank destroyers and such. Because again, they will also have a bit more of a benefit of just shooting as you approach. So that's also something worthwhile keeping in mind. If you sort of remember that while playing the game. Again, flanking, maneuvering with the tanks is much more rewarded when you use it with medium tanks in that department. Of course, assault guns and such can also do it, but of course it's a lot bloody harder with those. So that is something to keep in mind. ISU 152 might be a bit of a tricky one here. Might have gone a bit too good, but of course time will tell. Again, flanking as such will be of course options, and of course smoke as well. And of course in that department you can smoke to then cover your armor advances, might also suddenly be a lot more bloody worth it. And of course, so for example, have things like no target weak point all of a sudden. They've also got a lot more worth it as well. Adding a bit more punch, and all of a sudden again, starting a vehicle, for example, out in the open is now maybe even more worth it. Plus, of course, the increased penetration for that one shot. So overall, that also does a lot, but again, overall, it just does a lot more for armor. And overall, in the replays I've already watched, I mean, you're generally seeing more skillful armor play rewarded with more veteran tanks, whereas the one again who does poorly with it, of course, ends up losing tanks more and swiftly. So in that department, I do think it does a lot for, armor play. And of course, some departments, of course, going to take a bit of, adapting to as people sort of try to figure out how to use the new armor and how not to get it blown to bits. And of course, they'll be the ones charging straight at the enemy lines and getting all their tiny tanks blown to rubble, and of course, being a bit upset about it. So I mean, that's also, of course, something to keep in mind while playing the game. But overall, I mean, it's a large improvement here, and that's really sort of, I think, the clue of my thoughts here on the Elbe Day update so far. I might have to, of course, make an update video, sort of like, thoughts on the state of the balance, at this and this state, but I mean, overall, it's looking quite good. There might be a few hiccups here and there, but I mean, overall, things play out a lot more interesting. The armor play certainly also got, I mean, Austrians, for example, got cheap as well, so they're certainly also a bit more worth it. Previously, they cost the same as a Panzer IV, but definitely did not perform at the same level. SU-85 got more penetration. They lost a bit of frontal armor, though, but still, overall, looking good. Also, for example, now, how acceleration and speed works. So I mean, now there's a bit more benefit to, for example, rushing around on roads and such. So that also makes things a bit more interesting. Blitzkrieg got a bit nerfed. Not sure how I think about that one. That'll definitely need some more work to sort of figure out how that one actually sort of goes. But that one definitely also needs to have a little bit of look at, and certainly some testing thoroughly. But overall, I'm quite positive about this patch so far. things overall look promising, with lots of opportunities here for some fun armored action in the game and doing some fun armored damage. So overall, I think people should just try and experiment with things, you know, try out some different combination, try and flank more aggressively with their tanks, and use their assault guns in the correct manner. Since again, I do also notice people, for example, charging their Stooks like tanks, and unsurprisingly, they end up with a huge burning heap of scrap metal, which of course doesn't really do them much. So that of course is vital to keep in mind. Your assault guns are not tanks. They are not tanks. So overall, I think that largely sort of puts it as my thoughts on the Elbe Day update. Again, a huge boost for armor play, making it more interesting in many regards, adding a bit more. And also, of course, one of my favourite change actually is a change to ram. I almost forgot that one. Basically, previously, you could ram in a tank and there'd be, you know, both main gun and engine out. This time around, you only get either the main gun or the engine, which also adds a bit more, you know. For example, less like a Tiger suddenly getting disabled by something a lot cheaper, which is good. So either the Tiger actually has a chance of defending itself, or it can get out of the reasonably quick, whereas previously it was pretty much, you know, couldn't defend itself and was pretty slow to get out, in particular some heavy engine damage. So that's also a bit nice. In fact, quite nice. And again, you know, leaves ramming as a bit more of a precision tactical tool rather than, oh hey, I can now disable that huge piece of expensive armor my opponent's just got on the field in seconds. And thus also does a bit more for rewarding Germans for active flanking, because otherwise, you know, they could easily end up with a tank that couldn't do anything because it got rammed. Which was definitely quite unfortunate. So that's also something to keep in mind here. But overall, a nice step forward, doing a lot for armor play. Now, of course, the question is how people adapt to it and handle it. I'm sure that will be sort of how the next update or thoughts on the patch here might go. So hopefully you know, found something out of these thoughts here on my patch. I might try out something then after having listened to this, having had some brilliant inspiration, having listened to my wise words, and of course, ultimately, this is all my opinions. Of course, you know, feel free to disagree and feel free to point out why you disagree in the comment section if you do. Though do be civil about it. And this is Imperial Dane saying cheers and see you tomorrow.